Was this electrifying performer whose hips don't lie the Shakira of the ancient world? From the ruins of the ancient Mediterranean comes a legend of a dancer so lifelike, so impossibly dynamic, that her bronze form seems caught in motion even after 23 centuries. Who was she? How did she survive the Crusades, the collapse of empires, the plunder of the ancient world, and the darkest chapters of the 20th century? My name is Tyrone Demery. This is Hold Fast History. And when you think of ancient Greek sculpture, you probably imagine something big, white, and naked, like super naked. But tucked away in the Hellenistic treasury of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, there's a work that defies every expectation. A tiny dancer whose moves and charisma were so iconic, someone thought to immortalize her over 2,300 years ago. This is bronze statuette of a veiled and masked dancer. She shouldn't feel this alive. Using a metal as rigid as bronze, the sculptor makes her feel somehow weightless. Now, the rippling folds of her drapery swirl in a serpentine motion, and like a ballerina or a breakdancer, she's spotting her next step. Her raised foot hovering above the ground, a perfect moment of suspense. Now, up close, the details are astonishing. The lace pattern pressed into her slipper, the sheer veil cascading from her head, tiny eye holes cut into her mask so that she could see her audience. Scholars have puzzled over her since she surfaced in the early 20th century. Who is this dancer? Why was she made? And for whom? Now, standing about the size of a pencil and cast entirely in bronze, she belonged to a category known as Tanagra figurines. Named after the ancient city of Tanagra, where the first cache of these figurines were first discovered. Now, this dancer was cast around the 3rd century BCE, during the Hellenistic period. Now, that is the time between the deaths of Alexander the Great and the death of Cleopatra. Now, fans of art history might know the Hellenistic period as the ugly stepchild of Greek art, forever compared to its older and more popular sibling, the classical period. In fact, the Roman encyclopedian Pliny the Elder, writing centuries later, claimed that sculpture died in 296 BCE, a bold take and wildly inaccurate. Sculpture didn't die, it evolved. During the Hellenistic period, artists embraced individuality, drama, and realism. Now, Renaissance artists of the 14th and 15th century loved the classical period, and they drew inspiration from it all the time. The Baroque who would follow, however, that fire, that theatricality, that comes from the Hellenistic mind. And few works capture that shift better than this dancer. Now, her modern journey reads less like a museum label and more like an Indiana Jones plot. She first pops up in the early 20th century. After Howard Carter opened Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922, Egyptomania exploded all over the world. Now, this was a time when Western collectors descended on Egypt and the Middle East with bottomless appetites and very few scruples. Cairo was the epicenter of the antiquities gold rush. At the center of it all stood Maurice Naumann, head cashier at the Crédit Foncier d'Égypte and the era's most powerful dealer of Egyptian art. If something rare surfaced in the region, odds are it passed through Naumann's hands. And that's where we see our dancer first, in Naumann's personal collection. Meanwhile, in Europe, Nazi archaeologists like Gerhard Kleiner and his mentor Ernst Bücher were hunting for classical antiquities they believed supported their ideology. They collected Tanagra figurines in vast quantities. But one statuette escaped them, the only bronze one to survive. And that's because throughout the duration of the Third Reich, dealer Joseph Brummer kept the statuette safe in his New York home after having fled to America with his brother. She survived the Nazi hunt for classical antiquities by the skin of her teeth. After Brummer's death, philanthropist Walter C. Baker acquired her in 1948. Now, after Baker died in 1971, he bequeathed his entire collection to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And so the dancer's long, perilous journey ends on Fifth Avenue, far from the Crusades, the dealers, the war rooms, and the desert markets that once shaped her fate. That's where the paperwork stops, but that's far from the end of the mystery, because here's the real question. Who is this diva? And the sculpture pays special attention to the individuality of her pose. This feels less like a dancer and more like the dancer. Think of the Michael Jordan logo, a silhouette so specific you can recognize it instantly, a portrait of movement rather than of the face. Was this electrifying performer whose hips don't lie the Shakira of the ancient world? What we do know is this. She represents a real popular type of performer in ancient Alexandria, part mime, part dancer. At this time, female imagery in art is shifting. Elite women appear in pudicia poses, with arms folded under the breast and a hand held up to their face, an expression of modesty and the ideals of a desirable Hellenistic wife. Works like Tanagra figurines, by contrast, depict everyday women, festival goers, performers, and courtesans. Figures allowed emotional expression. They talk, they sing, they laugh, and they dance. Alexandria at the time was a Greek city, founded by Alexander the Great, who conquered lands from North Africa all the way to India. Alexandria was culturally hybrid, Greek, Egyptian, and Middle Eastern traditions colliding, and that blend really appears in her drapery. In classical Greek sculpture, a heavy cloak usually sat over lighter fabric. In the Hellenistic world, we see that trend reversed. A very thin mantle or shawl is worn over a thicker dress. Now, this was made of fine Egyptian linen called bousos. Here, the heavier folds of fabric spill over her feet, following her line of movement. This is visible beneath her sheer bousos. It clings to her body, revealing every curve. Bousos was expensive, a status symbol. So either this dancer had wealth, or someone who was very wealthy gifted it to her, or wanted to see her immortalized in it. Unlike the terracotta figurines that survive in abundance, this work was cast in bronze, a difficult, specialized, and expensive process. This wasn't decoration, it was devotion. Something someone held up close, examined, maybe passed around from hand to hand during a ceremony. By the way, I'm not exaggerating when I call her the Shakira of the ancient world. Today, Shakira has a 21-foot bronze statue in her hometown of Barranquilla, Colombia. Hips swinging, hair frozen, in an eternal gust. Now, this modern tribute shows how deeply we value performers and movement. Different millennia, same impulse. So, who commissioned her? That part is still a mystery. But if one tiny bronze figurine can survive crusaders, looters, empires, Nazis, what else is hiding in plain sight? For more mysteries tucked away in museums and beyond, stick around. This is just the beginning of the adventure. Tell me in the comments who you think might have held this statuette. And join me next time as we uncover another story that history almost forgot.